TMI? Nah, it's not. My mum was on the toilet and I remember like her like wiping and like it was blood. I was like, oh my gosh. And then she was like, this is what happens. That's it. Like, cutscene.
I can remember when the very first television commercials were made about a pad that you tipped blue water onto because red would have been horrific. And people were freaked out.
It was covered in absolute mystery. The Wahine in our family, they would kind of talk in this code. They'd be like, oh, I've got my mate or something. Who was this mate and why do all of y'all know her?
I actually don't know what that conversation looks like. Just being a guy, just don't have access to what kind of conversations happen.
Probably the earliest was in primary school. They made all the boys go out of the classroom and all the girls had to stay in the classroom. It was really awkward and intense.
I was 12 years old in an assembly and I stood up and there was this huge puddle of blood. I just stood up, stamped on it and ran away.
I kind of grew up like around a matriarchy and they would talk about it very openly. Probably a good thing for me growing up.
And I remember like standing in line waiting for the phone. Waited, I think, for so long and finally got the courage to tell my mum and got on the phone, and then there was so many people around. I was just so embarrassed that I didn't even tell my mum, and my mum didn't even find out I had my period. I think like another year, because then I just overthought it and even got like embarrassed to tell my mum.
Well, I'm a transgender woman, so I don't go on periods. My friends always talk about it and how they have cramps after like their monthly period.
It might be mentioned in a movie, TV show, and then that was it. And it was just all vague, all like hush-hush, to be honest.
I think there is like silliness attached to periods. This is gonna be embarrassing, but like Superbad, there's like the bit in Superbad where the guy's dancing with a girl and she has her period on him. And that's probably like how most young boys experience like representation of periods on screen.
The other guy who we interviewed today mentioned exactly the same.
It's so embarrassing for everyone.
In my whānau were really open about that kind of stuff. I think Te Ao Māori, it was just a natural part of life. The shame was introduced with colonisation, so now it's been unlearned.
I'll still check if I've stained on the bed. No one cares. My husband certainly doesn't. It still affects the way I look at these things.
Because I'm a woman and I'm conscious of how I look like all the time. There was always that fear of like getting the period mark.
For me, it's an inconvenience, especially because in a wheelchair and I need to do my self-catheterization, place where my urethra is very clean to avoid infection. And then you have this, flooding of the Red Sea. It's really annoying.
I lost a lot of weight and my period stopped. When it started to come back in my 20s, I was even more behind. Where do you go when you're in your 20s and don't think you're inserting tampons properly? But I did learn. I probably learned a lot of that in the strip club. You have to be inserting them properly there. In the last 3 or 4 years, I think I've been able to separate the idea of my period from this concept of being a woman and my period from sort of anything to do with pregnancy or childbearing. That separation means that it's just a thing that my body does.
All conversations around PMS that are had by people who don't experience periods are so frustrating. There's no general pain scales.
I wish pain wasn't as normalised. I still struggle with that today. I have endometriosis and I went through the pain for 10 years before I knew I even had the condition.
I have a lot of feelings about how I feel like my mom could have prepared me more, been more supportive. She kind of was more like, I suffered through this and now it's your time to suffer, and taking painkillers is bad for you, so you should just be able to tough through it.
I began to resent my period quite a lot because I felt like I wasn't able to cope with what everybody else was coping with.
I started getting like endometriosis symptoms by the time I was 15. Last year, as a 26-year-old, I had the whole uterus just...
We get the whole lot out.
So no more periods.
I don't have a uterus anymore, so I don't get my period anymore.
No more periods for me.
Same thing about menopause too, when your period stops, and that stopped for me too. Hallelujah.
What I really wish society included was not like differentiating the genders when it comes to education on human bodies, period. I never understood why it was split in the first place.
don't know what goes on with your body. You don't know what goes on with my body. We can cut other classes. I've got opinions on classes we can cut. Why did I do both statistics and calculus? That's a lot of hours on math when I could have spent time learning about periods. Period. Emphasis.
From my experience growing up, it was probably like under-discussed. It's such a critical part of life. And it's like, why are we kind of ignoring that? Maybe just some real empathy involved around like, this is how you can support people.
I know I don't owe education to anyone, so it's kind of those moments where it's like, of course I'm happy to share my life with people, but not you. You're coming from a bad place. I'm like lucky in that I'm, wow, talk about my body to whoever will listen. I think it's important to say that a lot of trans men do get their periods and non-binary people get their period. There's like more and more companies who are catering to that, like with boy style period underwear. That's like so cool.
I would love for this beautiful phenomenon not just to be isolated between Wahine, as in if there's ways that other people can understand to then help support, and then also inward look at ourselves in terms of everything that's happening so that we can then, you know, just be like decent human beings. Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah.
Cool. It's going to be very fun if I don't know what it is.
This is a thimble for a giant. Oh, this is a moon cup. I haven't actually seen one, but I've been with people who use one.
I definitely feel a bit uncomfortable about using a menstrual cup. There's not enough information out there on how best to use it. That's something I would like to know more about.
That is not a shot glass. It's a period cup. I don't know much more about them except that they're like good at saving the planet, and that if you see them boiling on the stove to be sanitized, you shouldn't make fun comments.
Oh yeah, these are my fave. Thank you for making these, thank you.
The more I learn about it, the worse it kind of gets. The cost of having to buy things like tampons is huge. It's something that most guys would just have no idea about.
I was told never to use it when I was young because apparently you'll lose your virginity if you use one of these things.
What's the difference between menstrual blood and sand? You can't gargle sand.